Welcome to the Perfectly Flawed podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. For those that don't know you, would you like to give a little bit of an overview of who you are?
My name's Brad Woodward. I'm a swimmer on the Australian national team. I've been on the team since about 2018 now, so I've been lucky enough to go to a couple of Com Games, a couple of World Champs. Started out as a surf life saving swimmer, and then slowly as I got a little bit older, became just a swimmer, and so had a good career, and really enjoying myself at the moment as I'm probably coming to the last few years of my swimming, but love swimming and love the sport, and really excited for the next couple of years ahead.
Yeah, that's awesome. How did you get into swimming, and did you start in swimming or did you start in surf?
So yeah, I think I grew up. My parents live about a minute from the beach, so I think for me, I got put in swimming lessons very early, just as far as like a safety point of view. When I was young, I absolutely hated the swimming lessons. Wasn't a fan at all. I think my sister got to quit when she was about 7, so she's 3 years older than me. So I was always asking when I could quit swimming lessons, and my mum actually was, I think when I was about 7 years old, was like, "Oh, I'll just keep going till the first school carnival. Then after that, you can quit." And ended up making it through to state. And after that, I think, just being something that I kind of wasn't too bad at, decided to keep going. And yes, kind of just went from there and actually started really enjoying the sport. And from there, I started doing a bit more surf. And then, yeah, obviously after that, kind of came back into the lane of swimming.
Yeah, I think it's so common as an Australian to sort of grow up in the water. I know, like, it was a rule for me from my parents that we had to learn how to swim. And once you finish lessons, you don't have to keep going. And I remember absolutely hating breaststroke because I got stuck. I couldn't move up a level because I couldn't do breaststroke. And then it ended up being my main stroke. So it's crazy how things work out. How did you go from when do you think it really clicked for you that yeah, you made states after, your school swimming. When do you think you're like, okay, I actually really like this and I really want to see where I can go with it?
I think it took a couple of years. I certainly think in the beginning it was more it's something I'm good at, so I'll keep doing it and see what happens. I think probably as I got to about 11 or 12, you start competing in state and a few bigger competitions, and started having a little bit of success there. So I think at that point I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed kind of training hard and then kind of reaping the rewards of that training. So I think around about that time I kind of decided that this is what I want to do. I probably started watching the world champs, the Olympics, Com Games, and you start to see those guys, those who I would consider my heroes, competing at the world stage, and you're like, awesome, that's what I want to do. You see a kind of pathway towards that. So I think around about that time was certainly when I was like, yep, this is it. I want to be a swimmer. I want to do what they're doing.
Yeah. And how does surf fit into the mix of all of that?
I think for me, my dad's was in the life saving club that I was in for years before me. He was probably in the 1980s, joined. So for me, it was like when I was 5 years of age. I was taken down there, put in nippers, and I really loved doing it. But to be honest, the first few years probably wasn't particularly good at it. There was a lot of running and flags, and I'm not a particularly good runner, so I wasn't the best. But as we got, I think, about 8 or 9 years of age, you get to start doing the swim and the board and the iron. And I think as that came along, I was a decent swimmer by that point. So I started having a little bit of success there. And I think I liked the idea that it's a little bit different to pool swimming. You can be a good athlete, but, at the end of the day, someone can catch a wave from behind, or, if you're having a bad race, you can easily end up winning because you can catch a wave. So I think it was a good sport in that, I enjoyed it. I was good at it. But it also was very different from pool swimming in that, the best guy didn't always win. There was a bit more of a skill component and a bit more of a kind of, I guess, it was up to the surf to see what happened.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed like I've done a few like open water swims, nothing like surf. And it's definitely interesting to see, I can probably outswim a lot of the people there, but because they've had surf training, they catch a few waves and they're miles ahead and you just can't catch up after that. So it is definitely a skill to learn how to do that and it can make or break you.
Yeah, 100%. Even as I grew up, there was kids that I probably thought I was a better pool swimmer then, and it probably frustrated me a little bit that I was like, oh, I swim, 7, 8 times a week. These guys are coming in 2 mornings a week, and they're beating me in a surf race. But I still think that's the fun of it, is that, there's the components of, if there's a sandbank you're running in, you're trying to find, where to go out, where's the rips, the best spot. So, I think for that was the fun of it, and the part that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, absolutely. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe your first senior team was the 2018 Com Games here on the Gold Coast. What was that experience like making the team? How did you feel? Was it what you expected? Talk me through it.
Oh, it was absolutely awesome. For me, I think about a year out, probably wasn't even in contention for making the Com Games. So a few months beforehand, there's actually always a session for the Com Games where they fit you for uniform and everything, can get your sizes. Just basically so at the end of the competition, they're not kind of rushing to get everything they need from you. I wasn't even included in that, so there's a very long list. A lot of people up for consideration. I wasn't even there, so I think in January or February, my PB for the 200 back was like a 200, and my PB for the 100 back was 56. And by Com Games, I think I'd shaved 4 seconds off the 200 and maybe 3 seconds off the 100 to get silver in both. So yeah, it's certainly a bit of a whirlwind. As soon as I made the team, they're kind of rushing to get all my sizes and everything, and putting me on the team. But it definitely went above expectations. I think everyone that I talked to that had been to a few Com Games or Olympics, they're like, this is a bad, village to experience for the first time, because your expectations are going to be so high now, and it's only going to be down from here. So I think as far as all that, the team was absolutely awesome. I think Com Games are so fun for Australia. We always go so well. So I was just excited to be there, and I think it was obviously a perk that I swam quite well and did PBs there. And I got to compete with guys like Mitch Larkin, who had been my hero, Josh Beaver, Ben Treffers. These guys that I'd been watching for years and do really well. All of a sudden, I was wearing the green and gold next to them. So certainly surpassed my expectations, and it's one thing that I'll always look back on fondly, being able to race a Com Games in front of a home crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you go from racing? Because racing can be such a big week, literally goes for that whole week, and you have to back up race after race after race, heats, finals. Like, it's a really draining week physically and mentally. How do you go from one race into the next, whether you did well or didn't do as well as what you'd hoped, to then pushing that aside to then focus on the next one?
I think that Com Games was probably a bit different for me. I was still decently young, so I think I backed up a little bit better. I also, the way it was kind of planned out, I had a few days in between, so it wasn't too much of an issue, because I kind of almost every race I did, I think I PB'd, so I was kind of on a high all week. But certainly when you look at things now, like the world champs that have just been, that's an 8-day meet. I think I started on the second day, and the medley relay was on the last night. Being a few years older now, certainly I don't back up quite as well. So it is certainly tough. I think sometimes you're on a high. I was on a bit of a high after the semi. I made my first world champs final. Having to try and get yourself back down it is quite hard. And I think it is a bit of a matter of experience, of just being able to go, okay, cool, I did that. Have your kind of moment of a bit of happiness, I guess, excitement, and then just being like, okay, it's about tomorrow. I need to be ready for that. Get to bed, follow your process. But then obviously, yeah, there's the flip side. I probably wasn't quite as happy with the final, and then being able to, that night being able to just be like, okay, I need to come down and just relax a little bit and not get too overwhelmed, because I knew I had the relay on the last night, and I had to swim well for the other three guys that were in that. So I think it's just a matter of, in both cases, almost just looking at, okay, what have I done well? What have I done wrong? Take both of those, almost not create a bit of a plan, but yeah, just certainly tweak a few things, and then going to the next race, just knowing that just because it wasn't the race I wanted, the 200 back, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't good. But like, if I just look at it and go, it was a bad race, you're getting nothing from that. But when I can sit there and go, okay, I didn't have very good turns, probably rated a bit wrong, and probably just swam it a little bit wrong, it didn't mean that I wasn't, the fittest I've ever been or swimming the best I've ever been. It was just probably not the best executed race. So I think just knowing that a bad race doesn't mean that you're swimming badly, and just being able to take the lessons from that into the next one, I think is a really big point. And I think, the 200 final, it gave me a few pointers for that relay. And I think I wouldn't have swam as well in the relay had I not had that bad experience in the 200 final.
Yeah. Do you think you've always had that sort of thought process of pulling the race apart of like, okay, it's not a bad swim. It was just these are the few things I need to execute better. Have you always been that way inclined, or have you sort of growing up and it's only now that you've sort of come to that realization?
I think I've definitely got better at it as I've got older. I think you just been to so many competitions, you're starting to see, one bad race can't define the meet. Otherwise, why even bother kind of still racing? But certainly when I was a bit younger, that was the case. I think if I had a bad race first day, it almost did ruin the whole meet a little bit. You just ended on this downward spiral. And it was the opposite way as well. Like if I swam really well on the first day, I always knew I was going to have a great meet because it would just go up and up and up. Um, so yeah, I certainly think there's a little bit of maturity there, and it is hard to do. I think, it is hard to finish a bad race and just go, okay, it's fine. It's just a bad race. Keep going. And I think there's actually one guy who's a few years older than me that I did surf with, and he always talked about, having your little pity party quickly. You have 20 minutes of, yeah, you can be down, you can be, disappointed. And then after that, you've really got to go, okay, on to the next one. What can I take from that and move forward? And I think that's really what I try to do now. I understand that, I'm going to finish the race, see my coach, be a bit disappointed, talk about it, go have my swim down. I'm going to beat myself up a little bit in the swim down about all the things I did wrong. And then after that, it's on to the next one. So I certainly think it is a bit of maturity. But yeah, it is a very hard thing to do. But yeah, I think just being able to, really in that moment not get taken away by emotions and be able to kind of almost stand on that balcony, look down at the situation, and just be like, okay, I don't want this to negatively spiral, and I need to from here pick myself back up and do things better, and make sure the next race is a better race.
Yeah, and it can be so challenging to do. I know that there's a lot of people that can get caught up, and even with someone like the experience that you have, it's still easy to fall into that trap like, shit, I didn't do the way I wanted it to. Why didn't it work? And it's so easy to spiral.
Oh, 100%, yeah. And I mean, like it still happens now. I think a little bit, certainly, probably a little bit more in season. We have races where sometimes we're not, I guess, we're not rested at all. We're coming in tired, and it's almost on the first second day you're having bad races, and you're just like, oh, I'm so tired, I'm out of it. I just not feeling this weekend at all. And I think then it's very hard to be able to go, because at the end of the day those races don't mean a lot. So I think it's hard not to negative spiral there, because at the end of the day you're not turning up the next day to race a world champs final or something like that. The next day you're turning up to race a race that like no one's ever going to remember, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think, in those situations as well, being able to go, okay, I need the race experience. I need to be racing, not necessarily well, but, I need to be trying to execute my races the best that I can. So I think being able to, look at that and just be like, okay, I need to get out of this what I'm here to get out of. Otherwise, it's been a bit of a waste of a meet. It's certainly a tougher thing to do, but I think if you can do it well, it really bodes well for when you come to a major meet and you have those races where you expected a little bit more, and being able to go, okay, that wasn't what I wanted, but it's okay, move forward, do better the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of those thoughts that are going through your head in something like the 200 backstroke, in that sort of last 75, 50 meters when your legs are absolutely on fire, and you've only got a little bit to go? What's going through your mind?
Um, Certainly there's times where it's just kind of like hold on for dear life. Just get through it. It's painful, but I think for me, it's certainly a bit of, just knowing that the guys around me are feeling the exact same. No one's at 125 meters in the 200 backstroke going, oh, I feel great at this stage. And to be perfectly honest, if you do feel great at that stage, you haven't gone hard enough. So I think it's just knowing that, those guys are feeling what I'm feeling. And at the end of the day, if I can just relax, push through, I think that's a big one for me, is relaxing. I think when I get quite tense, you really do spiral, the lactate just goes up exponentially, and you really start to hurt, which isn't great. So I think just for me, it's like, relax. These guys are feeling this too. And, just put this good turn together, really whack the turn, and then just, give it everything on the last 50. And I think a lot of the time, especially in a close race, the last 50, you're not thinking, you're almost just in a bit of a flow state. And it's just, that competitive nature just takes over, and you're just trying to get the wall in front of everyone else or whoever's around you. So yeah, certainly there's times where you really got to go. I've got to push even though I'm hurting, and then other times I think when you're just in a close race where your mind just goes on autopilot and you're just trying to beat people.
Yeah, absolutely. The competitive nature and the ego certainly kicks into gear for that last little bit, and it does wonders sometimes. So, what was it like after sort of the Gold Coast Com Games to leading into those other senior competitions where you had other Com Games and even World Championships this year? What was the lead in for those big meets like for you?
Pretty good. I think certainly different ones have different, I guess issues. And issues probably isn't the right word. Different barriers kind of thing. I think for me, 2018 Com Games kind of almost went off without a hitch. I didn't have any injuries, illnesses, just kind of everything went perfectly. And I don't think you're going to get many of those major meets in your life. I think that's probably the only one that I've ever had. Um, I think coming into 2018 Pan Packs, I'd actually torn a shoulder tendon about 12 weeks, basically straight off the back of Com Games. So for 6 or 8 weeks or something, I was just basically doing kick. How I got myself on that team, I still actually have no idea. I had no business getting myself back on the team, but so I think it's certainly in those kind of times, it's just being able to go, okay, it is what it is. I have nothing to lose. Um, just get on with the job and try your best. And 2018 Pan Packs wasn't the best meet I've ever had. It's certainly far from it, but I think you take lessons from that kind of thing. And then, fast forward to, I guess, something like Com Games in 2022 is, I had probably an average trials, but knew I was in quite good form. And, coming into the Com Games, similar to 2018, didn't really have anything go wrong. And then actually about 3 days in, I cut my finger and had to get 4 stitches. And I did it about an hour and a half before the 50 backstroke. So I think the lessons you take from things like 2018 Pan Packs, where, I had a torn shoulder tendon, you do really learn to just be okay being uncomfortable, being okay to be in circumstances that, aren't ideal. But at the end of the day, like what else can you do? If you sit around and worry about it, it's just going to make it worse. And same thing coming into this World Champs, I actually got COVID about a week out from Worlds, which is certainly far from ideal. But I think just as I've got older, you just learn to roll with it. It's just like, what am I going to do? Go back in time and not give myself COVID. So I think it is just being okay to be uncomfortable, not to be in ideal circumstances, and just being able to move forward, going, I'm just going to do everything I can do. I can only control what I can control. And I think if you have that mentality for most of the races you have, it always puts you in a good spot to swim well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to sort of backtrack to injury and how you manage that, because the physical aspect of the injury is sort of one side of things, but mentally, I think it can take a pretty big toll on you as well, especially if you're coming into a major meet. It's like, I've done all of this work. Have I just undone all of it that I've just done? And which is not always the case, but I'd love to hear your perspective on the physical side of the injury versus the mental side and what it's like for you.
Certainly, yeah, it's two different things. I think the physical side of the injury, it's certainly annoying. But at the end of the day, you just do what you can do. You train how, you just have to change training a little bit. And as for me, it's not the biggest deal. Like, it's a little bit of pain, you can put up with it. It's fine. But certainly the mental side, especially in 2018, it's probably something that it crept up on me. I didn't really think about. For me, I'd torn a tendon in my shoulder. I basically was told that I wouldn't be able to swim by the time we got to Pan Pac trials. I was still pretty young, and I was like, oh, screw that, I'll swim by Pan Pac trials. It's fine. I didn't even, the thought didn't go through my head. I was like, oh, I'll be fine in 3 or 4 weeks. It's not a big deal. And I did actually heal a lot quicker than what they thought. Probably lucky I have quite good physios around me and stuff like that, that got me there. But certainly the mental side during it was very hard, to stay on track. But I think having that Pan Pacs goal in mind did a lot for me. I was just head down, bum up, trying my best. But certainly off the back of that, I struggled a lot. I had to do kick a lot in that injury. Don't particularly like kick, so that was hard. But I think off the back of it, I had just put my body through so much and kind of my mind through so much in that, and it's only 6 or 8 weeks. Like, it's not a huge block. Um, but to the point where, like, off the back, I was just so emotionally over it. Like, I just, didn't really want to be at the pool. I didn't really want to train. Like, it was just, once I had achieved that goal, it was just, yeah, a bit of a um, tough time to kind of go through emotionally, because you just, like, I had achieved what I wanted, so it was so hard. And then all of a sudden, off the back, you're like, oh, I can't really be bothered going to training. I don't really want to race. I don't want to do all these things. And so, yeah, I certainly think for me, the mental toll is the hardest bit. It's being able to, focus on that goal and still kind of almost, even though you're focused on that goal, still enjoy everything around, rather than being solely focused on that goal. And then once you achieve that goal, almost just you're finished and you're left with this lump of, like, just tired over it and done. So I think, being a bit more all encompassing when you have those injuries, and just being like, okay, these, I come to the pool today, do what I need to do, then go home and, do something fun. And yeah, it's certainly hard to do, but as you get older, it gets a bit easier.
Yeah. Do you think too the fact that, leading into Pan Packs, it's like, okay, I have this time frame, I just need to make it through this, and you don't really think about what's going to come after that. And it's so many micro decisions that you're sort of making throughout the day, like, okay, well, can I do this with my shoulder? How am I going to recover? Should I be doing some foam rolling? What am I going to eat? When am I going to sleep? When am I going to do all these other things to ensure that every other aspect of my body is where it needs to be, so that my shoulder will heal and all those other things, so that when it gets to Pan Packs, you haven't actually thought about what comes after that. And you've made so many of these small decisions along the way that you're just like, and it's just like this relief.
Yeah, 100%. I think, like I said, trying to make the Pan Packs was the ultimate goal. And yeah, everything was just aimed towards that. I just, basically my entire life, I think even at that point, I might have stopped uni for the semester, because I just was, solely focused on this goal. And I think for me, at the time, I was like, this is what I have to do, this is what I should do as a professional athlete. But realistically, looking back, I'm like, it was such an unhealthy thing to be doing, just being entirely swimming, nothing else in my life. And then once I made the team, it was, that goal was over. And then the hard bit was, like, towards Pan Packs, it was like, oh, I want to swim well, but it's like, for me, it wasn't like I wasn't going to go that well at Pan Packs, because I had the American backstrokers, so I had like Ryan Murphy, and then Mitch Larkin at that point was racing, a couple other Americans, some Japanese backstrokers. So it was like, best case scenario, I'm making a few finals. So there wasn't a lot on the line for me. So it was like, once I'd made the team, that was, gold ticked. I wasn't too worried what came after that. And I think the big unfortunate thing for me was, had I swum well at Pan Packs, I probably would have, held my head high, been like, oh, that was good that I got through that injury. And maybe off the back, had a month off and got back into things, and I would have been all right. But to me, it was like, I swam bad, so almost like I deserved to just get back into training and just kind of fight it out, because that what I did wasn't good enough. Which, like, now as I get older, I fully understand. I was like, oh, I had a pretty big injury. I shouldn't have had such big expectations on myself. But I think that was the thing that really hurt me, was after everything that I did, and I'm super proud of, like, the fact that I had a pretty big injury, and like, I turned it around pretty quick and put myself on an Australian team. That, just a couple of bad swims completely turned that on the head. And it was like, I shouldn't be proud of what I did, because it was a bad swim. I should have swam a lot better, and then almost, just kind of turn back to training. It was like, I just need to get in and just start grinding again. And I think for me, that was the tough thing, because I just had gone, so long without a break. And I was like, screw it, I just need to keep going if I want to be better, rather than, taking the time to sit, relax, recover, and, really turn my focus to the next season.
Yeah. And I think, I guess, from what I'm hearing, is that you took a big learning of how important rest is and how important it is to sort of switch off from swimming. How do you do that? And how do you sort of balance swimming with Brad outside of that?
Yeah, it's certainly something I've worked on a lot, especially probably post 2021. I was always, as a kid, to me, a professional athlete was someone that did nothing else besides swim, or, your own sport kind of thing. Everything you did in your day focused around swimming. And I think, to a point, there is still that, like, my day is tailored to my swimming. What I eat is tailored to it, how I do gym. I work my day around swimming. But certainly, my whole day isn't swimming, if that makes sense. Um, but yeah, certainly now I'm doing full-time uni. That takes a bit of a break. Probably lucky. I live in Sydney, but my parents are on the Central Coast, so most weekends I'll go back to the Central Coast, just catch up with friends. I started playing golf a couple of years ago. Not particularly good at it, but I might come back, play around, and when I'm in Sydney, it's just go out, have a coffee, catch up with friends. It's pretty simple stuff. Like it's not like I needed to take up 3 or 4 new hobbies that took up a bunch of time or anything. It's simple as just catching up with people or just going out and doing something fun. And I think uni as well has been a really good. I mean, I was always doing it, but I don't think I was as engrossed in it as I am now. I think it's just something else that takes away from swimming. You can go and put your mind fully into something else while you're not swimming. And it's something I didn't understand at that stage. And so it was so easy to get caught up in this mindset of I should just be swimming all the time. And now I can really kind of sit back and go, okay, I'm thinking about swimming too much. Let's go do something else. And, I think for that, I've really seen the benefits because I enjoy swimming so much more now than I ever have. That's one thing I'm really happy about is that when I retire now, I think, if I look back, had I retired at 22 or 23, I probably would have left with a bit of a bad taste in my mouth about swimming. Whereas now I know that, when I retire, I'll have a very positive outlook on my career on swimming and know that I did really enjoy the sport. And to be honest, I'd probably keep doing the sport till I'm 40 if I could, but I don't think my body would quite keep up with it. But I'm just really happy that I'll leave the sport with quite a positive outlook on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is super important, whether it's through injury or retirement, to sort of say that you're Brad the person rather than Brad the swimmer. I think having that distinction is really important. Did you find it hard to make that transition? Because I know from speaking to other people on the podcast or even my own experiences, you go to a family gathering or you catch up with a friend, and the first thing they ask you is, how's swimming going? Which is not a bad thing because they understand that it's a big part of your life and they're just showing an interest. But I think it can be hard to sort of switch off from that mindset when you go see someone and that's the first thing they ask you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is a big thing. I'll be honest with my family. I think, people do ask about swimming, but it's almost is one of these passing questions of how's swimming going. I'll be like, oh yeah, it's good. Training's all right. And then we kind of talk about other things. So I think that is one good thing with my family is, it's not all about swimming. We have a lot of other things that we do in life. And we talk about that. So when I am with family and friends, I get away from it a little bit. But it certainly is hard to get away from swimming. And I think the biggest change was, I knew at one point I did need a change. I think a lot of this kind of change happened the end of 2021. Like I said, I just really wasn't enjoying swimming, was questioning whether I wanted to keep swimming, and just kind of decided that if I was going to keep doing it, because I really did, I missed out on 2021 Olympics, and I was like, I want to keep going and have another crack at it. Um, so I was like, if I'm going to keep doing this, I was like, I can't just hate the sport for the next 3 years because it's not going to be good mentally for me. And to be honest, like I was like, I'm not going to make the team in 2024 or not even give myself a chance if I keep kind of feeling this way about the sport. So I really decided that I needed to make a change and did work with a few people about that. And I think it was certainly hard. And I think taking those first steps of, it is hard to have swimming as your entire life, but at the same time, it's so easy to do because you just have to think about one thing all the time. All you got to do is turn up to the training sessions, and then the rest of the day you just get to go sleep, eat. So it was hard being like, okay, I'm going to go do full-time study. I'm going to do 4 subjects. I'm going to drive to uni 3 days a week. I'm going to go pick up golf as a hobby and do that. I'm going to catch up with friends a bit more. All these little things. It's hard to take those first steps because it's almost easier not to. But I think now looking back, I'm so happy that I did because, when I turn up to swimming, not every single day, but most days, I'm so happy to be there. I get to see everyone that, I train with. We're such close friends. And, I'm really so happy that that's the environment for me now is that I get to go and do something that I love rather than there was a time there where, I probably trained 15 times a week between swimming and dryland and that kind of stuff. And I honestly turned up probably 15 times a week going, I don't want to be here. So I think, it's just so great now that, I get to do other stuff and, do more with my life that I enjoy. And then also, swimming is almost just this like cool little hobby I have that I love doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've referred back to 2021 a couple times now. Was there anything in particular that happened that year that sort of created this turning point to say, I need to change because this is not working?
Yeah, I think for me, they're probably going back a little while now, but like 2019 Worlds, I had a terrible 2019 Worlds, and um, off the back of that, had a big break and was like, I've got 1 year left to make the team. Obviously, at that point, we thought the Olympics was going to be in 2020, and yeah, just really got back in towards that Olympic year, and it was probably still one of the best years I've had training wise. Was going really, really, really well. And, still one thing is I'm a bit devastated. I didn't actually get to see how that year panned out because I think it would have been quite good. But obviously around March or something, we, pulled the pin, found out that Olympics was going to be the year after. So for me at that point, I was like, oh, well, I'm having such a good season. This is going to be awesome. Now I'm going to have 2 years towards, the Olympics. So it was really positive, but probably to my detriment now was, oh, well, for 2021, I basically just went back to the Central Coast where my parents live and just trained like I did for swimming, but did it with like stuff that I do with surf life saving. So board paddling, ski paddling, running. So, I was still almost training 15 times a week and just basically didn't stop because I was like, oh, well, this is just what I'm going to do. And then in the end, by the end of the year, I got post-viral fatigue, which was hard. And then at the start of the year, I tore the tendon in my other shoulder. So I think I just started getting run down. Like it was a long time without really a break. Obviously the Olympic year is an absolute pressure cooker. So, there was just this pressure cooker for 2 years. And so I think by the time we got to March, April, I just really wasn't enjoying the sport. I was in and out of doing kick, swimming, modified training because, my shoulder was sore. I'd had a lot of time of, floating around at the end of the year because of the post-viral fatigue where I couldn't do things that I wanted to do because I was always just so tired. And so it certainly took a bit of a toll. And, in the end for me, the one thing I am proud of that year is that despite not enjoying it, I still turned up every day. Like I'm not enjoying this at all. I don't want to be here, but I want to be an Olympian. So I'm still going to put my best foot forward every single day. So I think I still got to Olympic trials in pretty decent form. I think, I had everything going well. I would have been all right. Unfortunately, I got quite a bad throat infection, a few days before trials started and, had a bit of a shocker of a meet. I could barely breathe in the 200. So I think I turned first at the 100 and might have ended up fourth or fifth or something. Just, had nothing left. But it certainly was, even though the Olympic trials bit, I was like, there was a reason why I didn't swim well. I still looked back on that and went, I really didn't enjoy the 3 or 4 months leading in. And, that has to change if I'm going to keep doing this sport. So, I certainly think that was, the catalyst was just, I didn't enjoy it. I can't not enjoy it for 3 years. So, something's got to change, whatever it was, and to me, it was like, if I don't change something, I'm basically just going to have to retire because there's no point in still swimming if I really don't enjoy it that much. So quite glad that I did change things. And, now I really have a positive outlook on the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so important to have. On the flip side of all of that, talking about success, how do you view success? What does it mean to you? Have you achieved it?
I think for me, when I was younger, I viewed success. I think like a lot of people, a successful swimmer is someone who wins an Olympic gold medal. But I think as I've got older, that definition of success has definitely changed. I think for me, the one thing I really love about swimming now is the fact that every day we're working on a goal. So, we have the goal at the start of the season, we have a process to achieve that. And, every single day we're, ticking off parts of that process. And so for me now, I think success is being able to create a goal, tick off everything you want to tick. And at the end of the day, achieve that goal. So I think I can't say that I achieve all my goals. I can't say I'm successful all the time, but I think I certainly have had some success. And I think there's certainly, where I've had years of literally having a goal, achieving it, or even surpassing it. And so I think Yeah, I'm not the most successful athlete there's ever been, but for me, my own kind of definition of success, I think I've had a little bit. I'd like a little bit more than I've had, but moving forward, hopefully, I will really reach some of those goals in the next year or so. And, it'd be, yeah, really nice to be able to go, my career was quite successful and I achieved the goals that I set out for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that sometimes then when you think about success that you achieve something, let's say that you've always wanted to achieve, you have a great meet, like you look back to that year that you had where you achieved everything that you wanted or that you sort of set out to achieve. Did you get that satisfaction of, yeah, cool, I did everything that I wanted? Or do you think that the goalposts just shift further and further and you sort of forget that that's at one point, that's exactly what you wanted?
Yeah, I definitely think that's a little bit of the case. I think sometimes you just finish a race and there certainly is excitement. Like I'm not saying like I just finished a race. I'm like, oh, okay, on to the next one. You certainly know. I think for me, the big excitement and the thing I probably chase these days is finishing a race being surprised. You look up at the time and you're honestly surprised that you went that quick. It's such a good feeling. You just get out it, you're ecstatic. But yeah, I certainly think, you finish a race, there is that moment of excitement and everything. And then you kind of almost moving forward to, what's next? What's the next time I tick off? What's the next goal I tick off? So that part is very hard, but I think that's just professional sport. I think most people would have a similar answer that, yeah, the goal posts just get moved forward. But yeah, like I said, I think the thing I still just chase is that feeling of being able to finish a race and just be honestly surprised and just being like, wow, the training's really paying off. And, I'm so happy that I was able to just do what I did.
Yeah, definitely. And if little Brad could see you now, how do you think he would react to what you've done so far in your career?
Um, Probably a bit happy and sad. I think as, a really young kid, you probably have all these wild aspirations of, winning multiple Olympic gold medals and stuff like this. And obviously, as you get a bit older, you're like, oh, okay, maybe that's not quite, achievable. But, I still certainly think as a 10 or 11-year-old, to be able to say, those guys there that are racing at the Com Games, winning medals, racing at the World Championships, I viewed those as absolute heroes and kind of almost looked at a world champion like, oh my God, imagine racing there, like how nervous you'd be, how hard it would be, imagine swimming that quick. And now the fact that I can say, I've done that, I think, little Brad would be quite excited. And I think even, I've always been a bit of a student of the sport. So I think even just some of the sessions and stuff that I do, as a 15 or 16-year-old, potentially looking at what I'm doing now, I think it would be quite exciting just being like, oh my God, I can't believe that you've done sessions like that. Can't believe you've done times like that. So, yeah, I certainly think you'd be proud, but, maybe thought there's that little part of 11-year-old Brad that's probably like, oh, why haven't you got an Olympic gold medal yet?
Is it weird to think that, you sort of said before how it was so cool to race with, people that you sort of looked up to, like Mitch Larkin or Josh Beaver, sort of on the Australian team, now that there's, a new group of swimmers coming through that view you in that same light?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, I still don't really think it's sunk in that, people watch me or people, could look up to me. For me, it's just like I'm just a person who happens to be able to swim decently well. Um, I certainly just like you look at some of the guys in the early 2000s, and obviously not saying I'm not in the same caliber of the Michael Klims, the Ian Thorpes, and that kind of thing, but to think that like I've been on the same teams that they've been on is pretty crazy, and I still don't think that's sunk in because you just like look at it like growing up in primary school and stuff. Those names were just like everyone knew who they were, whether you swam or not. And to think now that I've been on those kind of teams, and I've been on teams with the Ariane Titmuses, the Kyle Chalmers, the Emma McKeons, who are the next generation of that, is pretty crazy. And yeah, I don't think it's something that'll ever sink in because you just see them as kind of friends, people that you're on the team with. But yeah, to like almost be able to compare that to the early 2000s and just be like, oh my God, like I can't believe we're the team's doing the same kind of thing, and I get to be there for that. I don't know if it'll ever sink in, but it's pretty cool to think about it that way.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be. It'd be so weird. On a completely different note, Do you have an embarrassing sports story?
Ooh, I don't know if I have too many embarrassing sports stories. I mean, certainly I think as a young kid, sometimes you forget to tie up your cozies. So I think there might have been one or two times where I've dived in and they've come down and you spent the streamline trying to pull your cozies up. I'm probably quite lucky in surf life saving. I've had a few mates that have lost their swimmers catching a wave and stuff like that. But thankfully, yeah, nothing like that has really happened to me. But yeah, hopefully I don't have a. I've had a few suits split. Actually, yeah, probably one of the ones big states this year. I think I crouched down just before the race, like in a squat in the heats or something, and completely destroyed the seam of one of my suits. And so yeah, I was a little bit nervous about pulling up on the backstroke start. And I still remember saying like I'll do the race because I didn't want to go put another suit on and have to do the heat, an hour later or something. So I was like, I'll pull up, and if the suit completely goes, I was like, I'll come down and be like, I need to go get another suit. But I was like, if it holds on to where it is, I'll leave it. And yeah, thankfully it was only a little split, but yeah, it certainly probably could have turned into something much worse.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common thing for swimmers to worry about is splitting your bails behind the block. I've been there, and I know there's plenty of other people that have been there. And you just hope that either no one else notices or you cover it up well enough.
Yeah, certainly for me, a few of the boys noticed. I was talking a bit of banter behind the blocks, but to me, when I was a bit younger, probably a bit embarrassing. Now you probably just don't care as much, to be honest. It's like, oh, what are you gonna do?
Yeah,
It happens to everyone, but yeah, it's a good story, and thankfully got through to the finals. So that was the main thing.
perfect. I always like to do three questions to sort of finish with. And the first one is, what is something that you're most proud of about yourself?
Um, I think it's just, there's obviously athletes that have been through a lot more than I have. But I certainly still think my career hasn't been without its challenges, certainly injuries, setbacks. Like I said, there was times in my career where I absolutely hated swimming and kind of still persevered. So I think just the perseverance I've had, I certainly think there's still other athletes that, post 2021 would have quit, when they didn't enjoy the sport would have quit, when they got an injury would have quit. So I think just the fact that I persevered and at 25, I've still got a real love for the sport, and I'm PBing and swimming the best I ever have. So I think the fact that I've come through a stage and probably dropped off where a lot of athletes might have dropped off and quit or kind of faded away. I've been able to almost like regather myself and not be one of those swimmers that made one or two teams and disappeared. I was able to make a few teams, have a few challenges, miss a couple of teams, and then get myself back on the team and do PBs and make a world's final and tick off some more goals.
Yeah, I think sort of when that motivation starts to fade, that's when discipline sort of kicks into gear, and it just becomes such a habit that you just get up and you just turn up and you do your thing, that the motivation not being there, it's like, I know it'll come back.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. It is a really hard thing, to go through things, and yeah, there's certainly been times. I was actually thinking about this the other day, post trials, where you have a bad trials and you're literally swimming down in the warm down pool. Like it almost just feels like the mountain you have to climb just becomes too big. You almost feel a bit overwhelmed, and you're like, oh my god, like where do I go from here? Like I've put everything into a season and I've come out missing a team or not PB'd, and you're almost like, how do I not only get back to where I was, but then like take the next step? It becomes quite overwhelming. So to be able to kind of feel like that and have those moments and still be able to come back the next season, put a good season together, and swim PBs, I'm certainly quite proud about that.
Yeah, absolutely. The next question is, what is your favorite quote and or the best piece of advice that you've been given?
I quite like perfection is the enemy of progress. I think that's a good one, and to me it means a lot of, like, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So I used to have a real habit of I'd finish heat swims before a final, and I'd go back, I'd watch the swim 20 times over, I'd look at the race report, and I'd nitpick every single thing. And by the time you came back for a final swim, I'd have 50 things in my head that I'm trying to fix for that final. And obviously that's not ideal going into the race. and you just end up getting so many things wrong because you're trying to get so many things right, and it's just so hard to do. So I think for me now, it's like, I'm not going out for a final to, do the absolute perfect race. If I could do the perfect race, you'd be doing unbelievable times. I'm going out there to do the best possible race that I can do. So now I don't even look at my race. I have a real thing. So I think the whole of world champs, I didn't watch my races once. I didn't look at one of my race reports. Maybe my coach told me my turn times like once throughout the meet. And that's about it. Because all I want is, one or two pieces of feedback from my coach and just to move forward and, take every race as it comes. I think for me, when that perfectionist side comes out, I just tend to go so much worse. So I think just making sure that, you're trying to be successful, you're not trying to be perfect, is, what it comes down to for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last question I have for you is, do you have any tips or advice for those that are listening? If there's a young athlete out there that's sort of looking up to someone like you and saying, I want to be where you are or doing more, what sort of advice would you give them?
I think for me, the biggest thing is just patience. I think someone said that to me when I was younger, is just you need to be patient. And, I wasn't. I always, at 12 thought, by 15 or 16, you'd be, getting close to being put on the national team, which isn't the case at all. At 16, I was still half a foot tall and half a foot shorter than I am now. And, 20 kilos lighter, like I wasn't even close. So I think it's just, having that patience and just knowing that things aren't going to come quickly, or for the most part won't come quickly. But I think if you're willing to every single day, tick off little goals, work as hard as you can, at the end of the day, those years add up. When you're 15, you really want to do everything at 16, but like realistically, if you put 10 really good years together from 15 to 25, you can do some pretty crazy stuff at 25. So I think for me, I haven't been patient at all throughout my career. I probably still aren't. I want to go better, even quicker than what I have. But I think it is such an important part because for me, I'm 25. I'm starting. I still think, hopefully my best swimming is yet to come. So yeah, I think if you have patience with the sport, patience with your training, I think what you can do at the end when that all culminates, can be pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's some really good advice. And I think if someone had told me when I was younger to be patient, I probably would have said, yeah, whatever, and get going.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's such a hard thing to do, and like, I think every single kid's the exact same. You want everything right now, but it's such a hard thing to do. But I think if you can be patient, and I'm starting to learn as I get older to be a bit more patient, I think, yeah, you can really get some good things out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today and share all the wisdom and knowledge that you have. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it.